Hello, all you beautiful, sensitive, intuitive souls out there. I'm so glad that you've joined us. I'm Bevan Neiman Cortez, one of your co-hosts for this event. And I'm so honored to connect you with someone who is very well known in our field, someone who's been on this summit many times before and connected with the Shift Network, Judith Orloff, MD, who is not only a psychiatrist, but also an empath and a New York Times bestselling author of the Empath Survival Guide. And Judith has just released a new journal called Affirmations for Empaths. So I know we'll get a chance to talk about that today, and really excited to hear more about that workbook and that guide. As an intuitive and member of the UCLA Clinical Psychiatric Faculty, Dr. Orloff synthesizes pearls of traditional medicine with leading edge knowledge of intuition, energy, and spirituality. Judith, I'm so happy to have you join us today. Welcome to the summit.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here again with you.
And we're going to really dive into an exciting topic, which is empathy training. Not only are we empathetic, but we can actually train ourselves. We'd love to learn a little bit more about the difference between empathy, compassion, and being an empath. How do you define those different aspects?
Yes, well, those are good distinctions. I'm a psychiatrist and I'm an empath, and I teach organizations and groups empathy training. And why this is really important for empaths is that we need to train ourselves not to take on the stress or suffering of others at the same time developing our empathy in our hearts so it grows stronger. All right. So in terms of the definitions, an empath is somebody who's extremely, extremely sensitive. And in terms of the spectrum of empathy, they're at the top of the spectrum, the highest part, because they have the ability, we have the ability to sense and know and intuit, but we're also porous like an emotional sponge. So we tend to absorb, which is why we need empathy training, so that we don't absorb and we're able to keep our hearts open and have compassion while taking care of ourselves. So it's a balancing act that's quite beautiful, but you have to learn the skills. And I discussed those in the Empath Survival Guide, the basic foundational skills. Now, empathy and compassion are slightly different. Empathy is when you attune to another wavelength. It's when you can feel what's going on in somebody else. It's a vibration, it's an attunement. And you can feel if they're tired, if they're energized, if they're sad, whatever emotional state, if they're happy, if they're celebrating, you can attune to that vibration of whatever it is they're going through, and then have empathy for it. So empathy is a very active art, and it's a form of intuition from my perspective, way to reach out and attune, and then how you respond to that is the second part. But compassion is more, you see what's going on and your heart goes out to give compassion. It's not so much the attunement, intuitive process of really getting in there and attuning to somebody. It's more, I hear that you're going through a hard time and I have compassion for you. So it's a little bit more distanced than intuition, both, and empathy. Both play a role, an important role. And it's important to have compassion for yourself and compassion for others, but empathy for yourself and empathy for others means you're actually tuning into their wavelength, which is a fabulous energetic process of connecting. So I hope that clarifies my terms a little bit.
Yeah, I love how you're bringing in the different nuances of attunement versus just, having that heartfelt aspect. And sometimes when we tune in, we can tune in too much, right? We can continue to take on other things. Why are empaths and sensitives so prone to empathy overload?
Empaths are sensitive, open, loving, caring, intuitive beings who love nothing more than to connect with people, with nature, with love. They always see the best in people, which is a problem as far as I'm concerned. It's good to see the best, but you need to see the whole person. But empaths always like to see the shining parts of someone, the best parts of somebody. And they're just sensitive beings in the world, and many have been shamed as young people, as I have. I was told, oh dear, you don't have a thick enough skin. You need to be less sensitive. You need to toughen up. So empaths often grow up with that negative messaging. And part of healing as an empath, part of empathy training is letting go of those old messages, because an obstacle that gets in the way of feeling empathy and feeling empathy overwhelm are all the messages of shame and disrespect and dishonoring of your empathy that happened early on. And when you're able to be aware of them and heal them, then you can be much more open without taking on the stress of other people. So it's, a balance. Is you want to be able to empathize. You want to be able to help your fellow human with boundaries, and I will talk about that. And you want to be able to have empathy for what you're going through, which is very important. And what you may be going through is empathy overload. So for everyone to know, this is just part of the path of empathy training, saying, okay, I contend with empathy overload, and I need to develop strategies to notice when I'm on empathy overload, for one thing, and then take action to be able to calm it down. I think this is probably one of the biggest challenges that I've faced as an empath, empathy overload, because I'm extremely sensitive to sound, and I'm extremely sensitive to going over my red line in a day. If I schedule so much, I usually try and make it doable for myself. I don't overschedule. I don't want to rush because I get drained by that. I don't want to hear too much talking because that puts me on empathy overload. So I know some of my triggers, but it's not always possible to control everything, because I find at times I'm asked to do more than what I have. And that puts me on empathy overload. And they're things that I need to do. They're not things that I can just say no to, go handle it yourself. They're things I need to do. And that's where I go over the line. And what I'm working with in myself is how, even when I go over that line for those occasional circumstances, how can I stay centered and not take on everything, or not become agitated, or not say things I regret? Because I'm ready to go home at those points. I'm ready to, shut it down for the night. But yet I still have something else to do that's important, or helping somebody that I, don't really have the energy for. Occasionally that will come up. Mostly, if you suffer empathy overload, you need to try and make an energy budget for yourself during the day. And what I mean by that is look at your day in the morning and see what is going on today. What events do I have? What people am I going to interact with that may be feeding me, or they may be stressful? And just kind of map it out. And when you make your schedule, the making of the schedule is so important. If you have a schedule or work schedule, so that you easily can do what you set out to do, and happily, because you want to enjoy it. And so making an energy budget, and then making a contingency plan for what happens if something extra comes in that you have to do. And that's been the challenge for me.
And me as well. I know there are times, and I love that you're bringing this in, just being real about it. There are times when we love to be able to manage everything in our schedule, everything in our day, and then something pops up and you just don't have a choice but to deal with that. And so then you become a little bit overwhelmed, you become stressed or tired or drained. How do we move ourselves back into a place of being grounded and centered and re-engage our energy field? What practical tips can you give to everyone who's listening to help us when we get into those circumstances?
Well, I suggest not telling yourself negative stories about what you have to do, because I know where I make a mistake at times, it's working myself up with my mind saying, oh no, I have to do something that's too much. So you start working yourself up. You don't want to do that because that really takes a lot of energy. It takes more energy than you have to give at that moment. So you want to be very calm, and you need to train yourself. If I'm asked to do something beyond what I feel comfortable and I must do it, take a breath. Let's say the other day I was driving in a car when this happened. I had to pick somebody up in rush hour at a car place. It's like not exactly what I want to be doing, but I had to do it. And so I stopped, pulled over, took a breath, centered myself, tried to work down the stories I had, connected to my heart, and asked for help from a higher power, and a power greater than myself, a spiritual entity, whatever you want to call it, whether it's love or compassion or something that could come in with some tenderness for you at that moment, to give you something you personally might not think you have. And that's very helpful at those moments, to reach out to a greater force that you could connect with regularly. As empaths, I suggest that meditation is key to empathy training. It's going inside. I meditate every day, and I go inside and I connect, and I bring myself back to center, and I begin to feel the greater universe every day, and I begin to feel spirit, and I'm in the habit of doing that. And so it's very, very helpful if you're in a stress situation where you're asked to do more than what you want to do. You don't want to fight it. Whereas that's where I've gone wrong. I fight it, and less so now. But I'm just giving the example of myself, in that I know it comes up for people.
Yeah, I always sort of had this inner voice of resentment, or I call mine the catastrophizing voice, like, oh no, everything's falling apart. And I love that you're like saying, okay, I'm going to shift from that voice. I'm going to acknowledge it. It's in there. I have to listen. And then I'm going to move into this deeper like connection with source, with God, whatever you call it, to bring myself back to center. I love that you touched upon something I think is really important, Judith, and that is how empaths can kind of close up their heart, right? When we get into this space of empathy overload. Can you tell us more about that process of reopening your heart space?
Yes, well, I think it's important as part of empathy training to really know if you're going over your line, and if you're giving more than you have that particular day, what voices come up when you do that. Because the voice that comes up for me, a voice is, I can't do this. I can't do this relationship. I can't do this friendship. I have to go into hiding, that's not true. Those voices are not going to help you. I want you to know that. But I tell you this, that to take away any shame you have of having any of those voices, it's all human. This empathy training is about being compassionate with yourself when you're going over your line, and you have these voices that say you can't do it anymore and you need to go and become a monk somewhere. You say, okay, honey, I hear you. If you want to do that later, we'll talk about it. But right now, you need to calm yourself down. You're back now. You did the task. You want to focus on, well, I immerse myself in water. That's one of the things I do that works for me really quickly, where I just make a bath, and I have a window in my bathroom so the moonlight comes through. So that really calms me. So you want to do everything possible to calm yourself down if you've gone off the scale, and to be very compassionate with yourself as an empath, as this is one of the biggest challenges that empaths have, is energy, empathy overload. And that's why many of them, as you said, shut down their hearts, as it all gets to be too much. That's the coping mechanism. Instead of working with yourself compassionately little by little, they just say, nope, I'm staying in with my animals, not coming out. That's it. So, which is a choice. It's a choice, and I understand that. But there's also other ways to do it. And what we're talking about, is the middle path. It's between heaven and it involves heaven and earth. It involves the human challenges, and it involves being able to stretch your heart larger, even in those times of stress, to really stretch it. All right, this is beyond my capacity. I just want to tell everyone, I have an inner dialogue that goes on a lot as an empath. I talk to myself, okay, this feels like, it's too much. But you just take one step at a time here, breathe, center, calm down the stimulation. I was stuck in traffic, so that added to it. That's a trigger for me, is being stuck in LA traffic. Calm down, center yourself. Don't tell yourself negative stories about the event. It will pass, and you probably won't ever remember it. It's not a memorable event.
Yeah, I hear you talking about how do we build resilience? How do we see ourselves as not fragile, but resilient, and of course we need our downtime. And of course we can schedule that to the best of our ability, but life comes up. And in those moments, we can tell ourselves one thing, or we could tell ourselves another, right?
Right. But an empath's toolkit involves how you talk to yourself, because you've integrated voices from your family, or the shaming voices, or no, see, I told you it wouldn't work. I told you shouldn't be an empath. It's too much for you. Whatever voice comes up, and there's a wide variety of voices. But the good thing is, in a way, is that they repeat themselves. So you can know what the voices are when you get overwhelmed, so you don't listen to them. That's the key, is that you identify, you journal. This is the Affirmations journal for empaths that just came out. There are pages in there to journal. What are my voices that come up when I'm overwhelmed? You need to get that down in a linear way so you don't forget it. It's just thinking about it probably isn't enough. You need to really concretize it and put it on paper. And you could do an audio, but it's not the same for me as the groundedness of hand on pen and paper. And we don't want to lose that. It takes longer, but so what? We need to take longer sometimes and just devote that time to yourself. So these are the voices that come up when I'm on overwhelm. I'm not going to listen to them. I'm not going to make any decisions. And it's usually good to not send an email, not make a phone call, not make any declarative statements that you're going to regret or you're going to hurt somebody. And just try and be quiet, calm, get through it, and then find your alone time so you can deal with decreasing the sensory stimulation, because that's the goal. You want to get to the point where you go in your room, you light your incense, you light your candle, and you can go, and then it begins to correct itself.
I love that you're teaching this, specific process. Like, I feel that voice coming up. Okay, I know because I've written about this, I've identified it, that this is a pattern for me. I don't want to make decisions right now. I'm just going to breathe and calm myself and then let myself process all of that. This is so incredibly helpful, Judith. I know in your workbook, you also talk about affirmations and how they can enrich empathy and help us with empathy overload. Tell us a little bit more about how you teach empaths to use affirmations in their lives.
Well, affirmations are a way to get you to a positive place when you're on overload. And that is where you want to go. If you want to get positive, you want to get away from negative or fear. You've got to be functional. And the goal is to be calm and functional and know yourself well enough to have tools at those moments. I try not to have those extra things I have to do, but sometimes life comes in. And so this affirmations book, it has the sun on it, affirmations for empaths. It has the sun, it has the ocean. And so when you're going through a stretch, a struggle, you can turn to an affirmation. I am accountable for my own choices and actions. I am clear, intuitive, and purposeful. So when you're on overwhelm, you can repeat that. I am accountable for my own choices and actions, meaning how you treat yourself. I am clear, intuitive, and purposeful. See, that will realign you to, I can handle this, whatever it is, as opposed to, my life is falling apart. I can't do anything. And that's where the mind goes and the ego goes. Affirmations are a powerful way to lift you up from those swirling negative patterns that will pull you under every time, and lift you up and say, okay, I mean, just repeating it, I am accountable for my own choices and actions. I am clear, intuitive, and purposeful. All right. So you're on overwhelm. You read the affirmation and you're like a straight arrow going to do your task and then going home as soon as possible. That's what you're doing. But you do it from a higher place. You don't do it from the wounded ego or the part of you that feels weak and overly sensitive. You do it from, I am clear, intuitive, and purposeful. And this isn't toxic positivity like they talk about these days. This is about simply lifting yourself out of the muck and bringing yourself up quickly. That will bring you up quickly. And you can repeat it a few times. And suddenly you can handle this and you'll get home and you'll deal with coming down and quieting down.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like even if someone doesn't necessarily fully believe the affirmation the first time, by repeating it, by sort of living it out, you then rewire your brain to think differently about the scenario, right?
No, that's exactly it. That's why I love affirmations, because they work through repetition. And what repetition does is that it takes it from the conscious mind into the subconscious. And that's where you want it to be. You want to be programmed from your subconscious. The mind is good, but your subconscious, you go there. You could program yourself to go there during empathy overwhelm. And that's what you want to do. You want to program your system. And affirmations are a way of programming your system. And it's not emotionally bypassing anything. For those, that's another idea about affirmations. I mean, I guess some could be, but not the way I teach it. I'm not saying don't deal with your dark side. Don't deal with, other difficult issues of being an empath. I'm not saying that. I'm saying in these situations of empathy overwhelm, this is what you do that will help to get you through. And it's okay to be positive sometimes. It's okay. You just notice how it feels. Like anything you do as an empath, you notice, you practice the affirmation, and then you notice how it feels in your body and ask yourself, do I feel better? Does this help me? Or is it not helping me? If it's not helping you, whatever it is, don't do it. That's my belief. But I think you'll find, because I carry this book in my car with me, especially because that's where my high stress situations occur, usually, sometimes in the house, but in the car. And here's another one. I am responsible only for my own energy. I am able to observe the energy of others without taking on their stress. This is huge for empaths. I am responsible only for my own energy. This is what I'm responsible for, not you, not responsible for you and where your energy goes. I am able to observe the energy of others without taking on their stress.
That's such a powerful, powerful affirmation.
It's one of the key affirmations for empaths. And you want to observe, not absorb. That's the goal. And you could achieve that goal through shielding. That's one technique where you visualize a shield of light all around your body. It's so comforting. It's not defensive in that sense. It's a cover for you. No, it's a friend that you're carrying around, that you're erecting around you to keep the world a little bit more distant so that everything doesn't affect you. The sounds aren't so loud. The people talking aren't so incessant. No, it puts distance between you and external stimulation. And it's totally fine to use that kind of visualization technique. And also setting boundaries with people as part of empathy training. It's something empaths must learn to do. You can't get around it, no matter how difficult it is for you or if you resist it. It's important to look at what you're resisting exactly. because it often tracks back to early trauma where you weren't able to express yourself or assert your needs in your household growing up, or you were punished for it. I mean, I have patients who are punished for expressing their needs as children. Oh, it just hurts my heart. And so it's harder for these people to set a boundary and feel safe because they feel like they're going to be hit or feel like they're going to be emotionally abused somehow if they do it. So they're very afraid and cower. They cower. But still, you have to learn. That's all fine. I just want to give everyone permission. Every difficult emotion you go through, shame, fear, lack of self-esteem, is all part of the process. No, please don't think you need to be in another place. You don't. But working with empathy training, working with affirmations, working with the empath survival guide, you get lifted up. You get more of a mastery of what it's like to go out in the world and what it's like to be an empath who can contribute to yourself and contribute to others when it feels appropriate, or contribute to the world, or add more light to the world. So all of this is a kind of rigorous training. I like it personally. It asks a lot of you, but I think for my soul, it feels perfect. This is what I want to be doing because I want to be strong in the face of adversity. All right. And that's just not a theoretical thing. You have to be energetically strong and be prepared before it comes. And so that's what empathy training is being prepared and knowing some of the obstacles you're going to face with regard to empathy overload, unrealistic expectations of people, emotional triggers. You might find it hard to have empathy for people you don't like. This gets into a deeper aspect of empathy. Like you think, why should I ever do that? The ego. And it's true. Why should you ever? You don't have to do it. But I want to say what I found is when your practice evolves, and this is an evolution of practice. It's not something you just start if you're awakening your empath self. But, for some people who've been on this path a while, practicing having empathy with people you don't like, why is that important? I mean, you don't have to do it. I mean, people will say, this person is a monster. This person is a narcissist. They've hurt me so much. They've hurt my children. Why should I ever want to have empathy with them? I will never have empathy with them. People get very adamant, and that's fine. You don't have to. Go about your business and fine. It's perfectly understandable. However, what I've seen with myself and with patients is when you can make that extra stretch, you don't like somebody, fine. And you're able to open up your heart and do the namaste effect. I respect the spirit within you. I don't like you. I don't have to like you, but I still respect you. And I have empathy for, the ugliness inside of you or whatever caused you to harm others. I have pity on you. I feel sad for you. And when you're able to do that, even a little bit, what happens is you get more distant from the trauma. Now you begin to stop thinking about it so much. It suddenly becomes more, in the rear view mirror, and you begin to focus more on the future and thinking less about the past trauma and more about what's coming in your life or what's in the moment. And so it has incredible effects on detaching you from the trauma if your ego allows you to do it, if you want to give it a try, if you feel ready to try something like that. And you never have to be ready. Again, I can't give people enough permission not to do this. But for those who feel curious or intuitively drawn to finding even a teensy little bit of empathy for despicable people or people you just don't care for, on a personality level, this is an exercise that can help heal you.
I have found that personally as well. And it is a process to go through that when you've been hurt personally by someone. But to be able to get that distance you're talking about is so powerful, where I can differentiate between sort of their human behavior and their woundedness and how they're playing out that woundedness. And unfortunately, I intersected with that. And realizing that we're all a divine soul and that, if you believe in multiple lifetimes, maybe we'll come back again and there will be a different dynamic, like being able to get that distance was so life-changing for me. And I'd love to touch upon this, Judith, if you don't mind. When you talked about someone who in the past have been shut down because they expressed their needs or they expressed a boundary, when that throat chakra sort of closes up and you're like, I can't say this, what can we do in those moments to be brave and be resilient and really stand for ourselves?
Okay, great question. I just want to add something to the previous question in that you're not forgiving their heinous acts. You're not forgiving their abuse. You're not forgiving, the narcissistic effects on your family. That's not what you're forgiving. You're forgiving the suffering in them. So I just want to make that very clear. It's very different. You never have to forgive the act. You're off the hook. Okay, so in terms of what happens to people when their throat chakra constricts and they can't have a voice, it's so interesting to observe that. Because some people, I'm a voice reader. I love reading the throat chakra and voices in people. And sometimes people have very pinched off voices, like very nasal and pinched off. And these types are frequently very intellectual, where they have a lot to say in the mind, but their throat chakra is pinched off. And they're not really in touch with their emotions or energy. They're more mental. But if you have a hard time expressing yourself, sometimes you might get hoarse. You might feel like nothing could come out. You might feel a constriction in your throat chakra. As an empath, it's very fascinating to read your own energy and be honest about it. Where you could put your hand this far from your throat chakra as a form of energy medicine, energy awareness, and feel, I could feel my energy sensing my throat chakra. And you can feel constrictions, you can feel openness. I can feel the energy going beyond my throat chakra and around my neck and maybe some areas that need it. So it's interesting. It left my throat chakra and went more to my shoulders. So that's when you work with your own energy, it just does what it wants to do, what's needed. So to be aware of it. And if you can't express yourself, don't choose the hard ones first, the hard people. Don't do that. As I know from experience, my patients go immediately to their mothers and no, they're the hardest. The mothers are the hardest. So don't do that. Go to someone who's minimally upsetting you for whatever reason. Start with that in terms of, I don't think I could make it today. I need to say thank you for inviting me, but I can't go. To practice what it feels like to have a voice and to have words coming out, and you feel your voice, it's coming out, that's great. So sometimes the first challenge is just to get it out. Then there's, of course, the nuances of tone of voice when you express things. Tone of voice is so powerful. If you want to get through to somebody, tone of voice creates a certain energy. If I'm snippy with you, and if I'm critical of you, you won't be able to hear a word I'm saying. It's just human nature for everybody. So if you can have more of a neutral, even compassionate tone and say a positive no, I'm so sorry, I'm not able to do that. I wish I could, but I can't. And have your eyes actually giving off love with someone you don't like and someone you're saying no to, or both. But say no. You see, sending them love or appreciation through your eyes or through your tone isn't going to hurt you a bit. No, you're not going to pay anything for that. You're only going to gain. And so you're saying no, but it takes practice because people associate no with punishment, and it's not. It's actually a gift, where you just to yourself, for one thing. And you can't do everything for everybody. If you did, you would be in a perpetual state of empathy overload, and you'd never survive as an empath. So it's just not possible. So part of the practice of empathy training is finding a voice and starting with the easier people or practicing with a friend. I often do this with my patients where I'm the difficult person and they're wanting to say something. And sometimes they can't do it at all at first. It's just impossible. They're just freeze, which is fine. Start with freezing. That's our starting place. That's fine. You don't want to fight it. You want to just, okay, I'm freezing. And then we talk a little bit. They get more comfortable. And then something comes out. You see, just celebrate when something comes out. It's really important. These seem like little things, but I'm so celebratory over the growth of empaths. I know the power of so-called little things. I'm into little things, and any true, authentic changes are positive.
Yeah, what I hear you talking about is having a dress rehearsal, either with yourself or bouncing it off a friend. Like, okay, I'm going to say this. How's this coming across? How does this feel to me? Do I think this will be received? And then you're gaining confidence, right? That, oh, yes, I could actually say this in the moment with that person.
Right. You get a script as opposed to just being terrified and landing in the situation. It's really good to practice so that you have a script and you have a sense of having done it before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you say that there's specific sort of empathy statements that can help us to improve our communication skills. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Let's say a friend is going through a difficult time. It's usually good not to overexpress yourself, but to keep it, whatever you're going to say, very heartfelt and short in the beginning, such as, my heart goes out to you. I feel what a hard time you're going through. Okay, that is what the empathy statement. What you don't do, and this is what a lot of people do, is say, oh, I've gone through that too. And I went through all this trauma with that. And I did this and it was horrible. And so they make it about them. And, I did an informal survey of people in my empath group on Facebook. And they said the number one thing that bothers them and turns them off is when somebody makes their issue about them. It's very irritating. And you're not making an empathy statement, then you're turning everything to yourself because you identify with it. And that's fine, but it's not about you in those moments. It's about the other person. And so people usually do it unintentionally. They're not intentionally trying to steal all the energy. They just instinctively react, and then they're off and running. And the other person is going, what? I don't feel listened to at all. Now I'm listening to them. So an empathy statement isn't about you, it's about them. And then it's letting the energy hold it, not trying to overhelp. A mistake many empaths make is getting in there trying to fix it. Oh, let's try this, let's try that. Or have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? That's not the first thing to do when you're making an empathy statement. It's just to say, I'm here for you. If you are, you might not be, but if you are there, I'm here for you. My heart goes out to you. I'll be thinking of you. And you see, that's enough. Sometimes that's all people need. Empaths make a mistake of just going overboard with all of their empathy. And it's just, get away from me. It's too much. When people do that with me, or how can I help you? Or can you go to this energy healer? Like, leave me alone. That's how I feel. And I think other people feel that way too. So the empaths, because you don't need all this input. All you're asking for is the heart energy to come towards you and give you a little boost, and to know you're not alone. And to know they care. That's an empathy statement. So think short with empathy statements. Don't get into big explanations. No, I feel for what you're going through. I'm here for you. And sometimes if you're doing that with a partner, or spouse, the best thing you can say to them is, I'm sorry, this is so hard, and I'm very confident you can handle it. As opposed to, you can't handle it without all my suggestions. So I'm going to give you this. And they don't like that. So, to show confidence in another person's strength is also a wonderful empathy statement. And empaths tend to overdo, from a good place, of heart. Then you're not, if you're doing that, you're not doing it to hurt somebody, you're doing it to help them. But what I'm saying is that you're not really helping them so much. You're irritating them. So it's a judgment call. And some people do need more intervention than that. Some people do Like I had a friend who came over once and just sat on my floor and cried for 2 hours. And I didn't say much. I just sat there with her because that's what was called for. I felt good about it. And, she wasn't really a crier. So it was a new thing for her to let it all out. And we had that kind of relationship. So it felt fine. So sometimes less is more. Just know with your verbiage, what comes out. Just have faith that other people do have strengths in there, and especially with children. If you're a parent and you have children who are struggling, you want to help mirror back their strengths with your empathy statement. Or I know you can handle it, or you can come to me if you have any questions or if you need extra help. You don't want to do it for them necessarily. And empathic parents often want to protect their children, and they don't want them to go through the bumps and to fall down and all that, which is part of life. You just want to be a guiding presence. You want to be a heartfelt presence as other people are walking on their path, so they know you're there. What other people don't want to feel is alone, or that they're unimportant, or that they're unseen or unheard. Usually if somebody feels heard, they could take a deep breath. Somebody's seeing me. They get what I'm going through. There might not be a solution now, but this person is here. And that is what makes all the difference that I found.
This is such an important distinction you're making, Judith, and that when we say to someone, I'm sorry you're going through this pain, and I know this is really hard for you, I'm confident that you will find a way through, is very different than saying, can I fix it for you? And we don't want someone to say that to us. Like, we don't want to be affirmed that we're weak and we can't take care of our life, right? We might have a meltdown in a moment, but that's not forever. And so this is really huge distinction.
It's not forever. And empaths on the path of self-realization have learned skills. So especially if you're dealing with a fellow empath who has done a lot of personal work, you have to give them a lot of credit. They can always ask you, or you can say, the friend could say, or you could say to someone else, I'm floundering. I can't see my light. I'm just so down on myself. Can you help to lift me up? Either with a hug, or sometimes you can put your hands together and share energy, or just a hand around your shoulder, an arm around your shoulder, a pat on the back, that kind of thing. You don't want to overdo. So that's my message to you, empaths that have such open hearts, that can't stand to see people suffer. I just want to say you have to get used to it. It's not your business to get in there and take away everybody's suffering. It just isn't. People are here on earth to learn and grow and be on their own spiritual path. All right, you can respect that, to have some respect for that. I understand your impulse as an empath to want to fix it and want to take away the suffering, but try and take a breath, center yourself, and get into more of a witness, loving state, where your heart energy, this is an important skill to learn. So you could turn the heart energy on yourself when you need it, inward, and also to other people. That is the most uplifting thing you can do. It is so uplifting just to feel someone radiating heart. And you're swirling around, but this heart, like, oh, that feels good. So suddenly you're not swirling as much. That's a great gift you can give to someone, is the energetic transmission of the heart. Or in the greater world, if someone is suffering, if there's war in another country, or, all the terrible things that are happening, in your meditation as empaths, you can send that country, literally a whole country, the heart energy, just through your intention to do it. The heart energy is so big, you have no idea, and it knows how to travel. So if you intentionally send your heart energy to wherever you think needs it, that's helping more than all your worrying and suffering and, oh my God, the world's falling apart, that kind of thing. If you want to do something practical and something that will uplift the people of that country, just send them some heart energy. Your suffering and going around isn't going to help them any. I don't know if it's going to help you. I don't think it's going to help you that much, really. I think it's important to be able to see it from a different perspective, but that doesn't mean you're not empathic. See, that's where empaths go. They say, well, I'm not empathic if I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that. Yes, you are. You know, how you hold your energy can be empathic or not. The tone of your voice can be empathic or not. And you can say no to people. And if you know, we talked about before, if you don't like somebody or somebody hurt you, if you're at that point to practice that, you can practice if you feel it's right. If you don't feel it's right, don't even go there because it won't work. And it's not good for you at that point. But if you're curious, some people have this intuition, what's she talking about? And you want to go there, you want to experiment with it. That sounds, you know, like not something I want to do, but I feel my heart is motivated. So you want to try new things. And this is just an exercise in stretching your empathy further. And also, if you're jealous or envious of people, that often gets in the way of empathy, you know, because you're so afraid that you don't have enough. And if this person gets this job or gets this relationship, it's going to make you feel worse because you don't feel you have enough. And I totally get that feeling. I've worked with envy and jealousy in my life, you know, because I really, that was, I guess, of all the emotions, you know, that was one I really didn't want to bog me down because it just burned my system. It felt like a burning, and I just didn't want to be that person. So I've worked with various people throughout the years who I felt are this or that, and I've really made good progress with it, you know, in terms of knowing I'm enough and knowing, God, the bounty and the gifts I've been given in this life. I mean, come on. I mean, I've been given so many and I'm so grateful. And so it's just something to notice if your empathy gets eclipsed in those situations, if you're feeling like you want what they have and you don't have enough. It's a little hard to show empathy, but you can still, that's your ego. You can still find empathy for them by shifting in their hearts and sending them goodwill and happiness for the bounties that they're experiencing and the happiness that they have. My happiness is your happiness. There's no greater happiness in the world. That's the Buddha saying. That's the gift of empathy and intuition, is to feel happy. I'm happy for you, Bevan. I'm happy, you know, and that feels great to be happy for other people, whatever they're experiencing, and to work on your own issues of enough and one foot in front of the other, whatever your life is. It's hard if you're going through a million challenges and this other person seems to have a, you know, a graced life. First of all, you don't know what people are going through. I mean, I tell you, as a psychiatrist, you have no idea. I do. You know what people are going through. And also your path as an empath is so important, that you've awakened, that you're coming to the summit, that you're open to hearing how to strengthen yourself and be an empowered empath, so you can get out in the world and feel like a strong rooted tree rather than everybody and everything affects you. So that's part of the journey. It's all a beautiful, illuminating part of the journey that we're all doing together. And those of you who felt alone as children, you're not alone. I mean, look at this empath summit. No, we're everywhere. So you can find solace in that, even if we've never met personally. You could find solace in knowing there are others like you all over the world.
Mm. You bring up so many wonderful points here, Judith, and I am so, so happy for you and affirming your success and your journey. And every time that jealousy or envy comes up for me, I just remind myself, this is my path and that's someone else's. We're not walking the same path. We're not meant to walk the same path. We bring different strengths. And so I think this is really powerful. In addition to what you're saying is that we're not alone. And I know that there are many places where people can connect with you after the summit to stay in tune with your work and receive. You have so many different practices in all of your life, your years of experience that you've had in this field. What's the best place for them to reach you, to be in touch with you, to be connected with you?
You could find out about affirmations for empaths and my work and my workshops and lots of my blog free. Everything's free on my site in terms of the blogs and the videos. And it's www.Judith Orloff.com. And you could be part of my empath support community on Facebook. Come to workshops, read, get a foundation. The Empath Survival Guide is the book to start. Thriving as an Empath is a day at a time self-care book, which is so essential for empaths. And then affirmations, having fun, the light path, the joyous path, lifting yourself up when you're on empath overload. So at drjudithorloff.com.
Wonderful. I'm actually in your community. I enjoy it. There's some great conversations going in there. So encourage anyone who's listening to join in and get connected. And I'd love for us to maybe leave this conversation, Judith, today with why you believe that empathy is the medicine that the world needs right now.
Empathy can help save the planet because it's the opposite of the ego. It's humans making a commitment to connect with one another, our human family, and bring us together. Empathy brings unity. Unity is healing. When you don't have unity and you have separation and polarization, it's kind of a disease of the world. But empathy will bring us all together and go beyond the ego so you could connect with all of us, all empaths and all humans and all life forms and all nature, and to connect. And that will bring this planet together as well. I really feel strongly that there are different levels of empathy that can weave us together with a golden thread and help to overcome some of the challenges of the heart and of the mind that we go through.
Thank you so much for lending your wisdom, for being such a strong advocate, for getting out there, even though you need your own downtime and alone time as well. But you've just always dedicated yourself to advocating for people like us. And we just appreciate your leadership and your guidance and your presence here on the summit.
Thank you.